So let's go ahead and start. Mr. Riley, the administration, there has been criticism for the approach to the summit. Foreign leaders have criticized the exclusion of Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. My colleague addressed that well in his opening. Others have criticized the lack of a plan to improve the region's economy and trade linkages, or overall lack of prioritizing the region. These are criticisms that, would not be unexpected. Summits are good for bringing leaders together to dialogue, but the real test of a summit is if there is after action. What is the administration hoping might be the after action results or strategies coming out of the summit in June?
Thank you, Senator. We were indeed pressed as a result of the pandemic, and a lot of the preparations have in fact been compressed. We were only able, judging the evolution of the pandemic and other circumstances, to announce earlier this year that Los Angeles would be the venue. And it has, in fact, made communication tighter. But we've been working on developing a positive agenda from long before that, and in consultations with other governments. And these are some of the outputs that are the results that we hope to encourage. And I mentioned some of them in my opening comments. First, working together with governments in the region to develop an action plan on health. Now, it's not just a question of responding to the crisis, but rather, look, this hemisphere created the modern public health systems of this world. The predecessor of the Pan American Health Organization long predates any other multilateral organization of that type anywhere in the world. And we have 8% of the planet's population and suffered something like 30+% of the fatalities in this Western Hemisphere.
And I'm just going to dialogue with you rather than we each
Please.
speak a long time. And that was the case. 30% of the population, 8% of the population, 30% of the deaths, but we only sent 8% of our vaccines to the Americas. We prioritize based on population, not based on need. In the Americas, because of migration flows, there's probably a much greater case to be made that it was in the United States' interest to prioritize more vaccine delivery in the Americas, because that's where the threat was. As we were doing vaccine distribution within the United States, we tended to prioritize communities that were getting hit hardest by COVID. But we kind of used an approach globally. Well, let's just spread it equally over every part of the world, whether or not there's a serious challenge. And I would argue that that provision of 8% of our vaccines to a population that had 30% of the deaths, it was an under prioritization of the Americas. And we were slow going in. Russia and China got in first with PPE. The good thing is, once we started producing vaccines and delivering, there was great appreciation for our effort. But so I think the vaccine diplomacy has opened a door after we kind of got out of the blocks slow. But I hope we'll build on that door opening. And I was pleased to hear you put health as one of the first pillars, because I think that could be such an obvious area given the times we live in and the recent success that we've had in at least delivering high-quality product in a way that's been appreciated.
And sir, we've seen as well that now, as this circumstance has evolved, we see governments and individuals across the region opting for higher quality, more reliable resources provided from U.S. innovation and U.S. Firms in order to meet these requirements. And we have managed to distribute free, as you mentioned earlier, free and without strings, nearly, I think it's 68 million doses. And we have, in fundamental ways, helped change the trajectory of the pandemic.
Let me just stick with health, and I'll go a little bit over, and I want to go to Senator Rubio. He raised in his opening this sort of nearshoring concept. A lot of our supply chains are, in China and Asia. We hadn't defined in the past health equipment, medical equipment as kind of a national security supply chain that we needed to keep close. And so we ended up really in a jam when it came to things like PPE at the front end of the pandemic. These are textile products. They could be perfectly manufactured in, American textile firms that are already operating in Central America. They could expand employment, expand opportunities. The idea of defining medical equipment, medical supplies as a national security imperative and wanting them closer to our shore. They should be manufactured in the United States or possibly in a country with a trade agreement with the United States. This could bring tremendous economic opportunity to the Americas, and it could also be part of this first health pillar. We're producing more to prepare for the next challenge and the next pandemic right here that will benefit everyone. Is that sort of nearshoring focus, or how we can drive economic development to meet the healthcare goal that you described as Pillar 1, is that the kind of thing that there will be discussions about?
We've tried to work very hard with colleagues across the region as we head into the summit to have that kind of cooperative discussion about the standards, the market requirements, what consumers of high quality health goods need in terms of production, and what firms need in terms of the standards for transparency, in order to create just those kinds of opportunities in health, not only in health, but in health. And we've certainly had discussions on the sort of technical nuts and bolts of these sorts of challenges with governments across the region. I know certainly with the government of Colombia, we've had these discussions, and with others, as to how they can make themselves attractive to free market, a free market to participate in this kind of production, because we know that the region has the talent and the creativity to do so.
I'm going to now turn it over for questions to Senator Rubio.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple points on the offshoring thing. And number one, the most important thing they can do is